Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience and retention is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing with some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself from the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to follow us on Twitter at Customer Fanatics. That's customer and then Fanatix. And also just follow me on LinkedIn at Heather Younger. That is because I'm in the process of writing a book based upon this podcast, which will have amazing stories of those on the show. And I'm going to be going a little deeper too, so you will not want to miss it. But I'll be putting out tidbits, asking for feedback related to the book cover and just ideas and colors. I want you to be a part of that. I want you to lend your voice to that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at customerfanatics.com, and you'll get a couple freebies as well, including the first chapter to my book and some emotional intelligence tips as well. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you enjoy this show. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and today I am just very, very humbled to have Gustavo Tavares. He and I met in Brazil when I was at the Harvard Business Review Brazil week talk that I was doing. And he was the facilitator of some of my discussion. And right away, we just had a connection. His focus is so much on making sure that leaders inside of workplaces are doing everything that they need to do to create really fruitful cultures and great employee experiences. So I just had to have him on because he just warmed my heart to meet someone in Brazil that had kind of a similar thinking, but brought an extra zeal to it. So Gustavo, that's why you're on. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here, and hope we have a very nice conversation.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
Well, it's a good question because it's pretty much focused about the journey itself. So I have been leading teams for the past 15 years or so, specifically as part of my role, as formal part of my role for the past 12 years. It's interesting because I have been able to deal with multicultural, multidisciplinary teams all over those years. And it's always something that it's always a learning process. So it doesn't matter how experienced you are. It doesn't matter how many years in the function you have, you're always learning. So that's why I guess it's important to focus on the journey. So right now, when I look back and all the experiences that I've had on my career, I still think that with the team that I'm leading right now, still have to develop some other skills, some other abilities, and I'm humbled to recognize that because it's part of the core aspect of leadership to me. It's always to be open to new possibilities, open to new perspectives, and to be aware that no matter how well prepared you are, you always face some new challenges, and you have to be ready to accept and to adjust yourself to that.
I love that. That's echoed quite a bit here on the show, this idea of that kind of just having a learning mentality and not feeling like have you ever arrived or like you're just too good to actually learn anything new and change and shift. And I think for the work that you do, it's kind of goes hand in hand with this idea of consistent change, right? Because you're having to get others to move in one direction or not in order to create the cultures and the environments that they want. And so it almost, makes it hard for you not to be one who does the same.
And it's also so very much challenging, because if I don't allow my teammates to know that I'm open to change, how can I ask them to be able to be open to change as well? So it's something that is a little bit of it's about consistency, as you said. So it's important that I am the first one who is showing evidence that I'm really open to change the way I'm working, or the way I'm approaching to things. So when I talk to people that they should be open and to be flexible, they are knowing that it's not just me saying, but it's something that they have seen me doing that. So it's in a way, it reinforces my role as leader to be providing them with positive examples of things that I would like them to do by doing that then for me first. So I guess this is the way that I at least been trying to focus my energy and focus my leadership style over the past years.
It's interesting because you do it so easily and say it so easily. It does not come very easily to most leaders. And so what happens, and the reason why there are so many employees out there in the world, actually, the reason why you and I do the work we do is because leaders aren't leading necessarily by example in many cases. And they're not showing, being like the positive examples first before they go expect their people to do the same. And so I think it's so funny, and it touches my heart that it's just so easy and lighthearted for you to say and to do, but not a lot of people are doing it. That's why we do the work we do, right?
Exactly. And it's about try to always break the bubble. So leadership always puts us on a bubble. I remember when I was on my very first years leading teams, I remember I had one boss saying to me, well, you know what, a leadership will isolate you because you will be longer part of the gang. And I said that, well, why is that? Why should I not be part of the gang anymore? Why does it happen? So I in a way I had to accept that in a sort of way I wasn't really part of the gang anymore, but I need to be closer enough to my teammates so they are able to understand that even though I'm a leader, there's no barriers between us. So I guess this is the biggest lesson that I've learned over these years. When we talk about especially leadership styles, people tend to be very, now he's no longer part of our team. He's now part of the other team. He's not, talking to us mortals anymore. So it's something like, why is that? So it doesn't change things. So I guess if people are really willing to and be cautious about trying to avoid that this bubble is created, so you have to burst this bubble of the leadership that isolates you. So you have to be aware that you have, responsibilities as leaders. Obviously, you cannot disclose everything that you discuss on a leadership team with your peers or with your subordinates. But on the other hand, it's important that you create with them a trust relationship. So they listen to you. They know that you are there for them. At the same time, they have to know that it's not everything that you can discuss with them. But I guess this bubble, which I think it's so visible in many situations that I observe. So every time I visit a company, I always see those bubbles, and those leaders sit over there, and the rest of the team sit on the other side of the floor, or any other floors. And why is that? Why don't you guys sit together? And why don't you guys discuss with each other? Why don't you guys have lunch together? And I guess this is the biggest mistake or misconception that we have. So it's not because you're a leader, you should be not part of the team. So you have to think on how can you connect to the team, and how can you connect to the people so you can become a better leader. Otherwise, you'll be isolating yourself, and this isolation doesn't create anything else but confusion, lack of communication, lack of trust.
Love it. If we're like vibing right now, Gustavo. Our brains are connected, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about that connection.
I know, because
topic.
It's interesting because we tend to think so much alike, and that it sounds so natural that we are having this conversation. It's like we have rehearsal to that. So it's people. This is live. I have not rehearsals to that. So it's yeah, we're speaking our minds here.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So actually, you spoke about leadership style. How would you think your people describe your leadership style?
It's funny because over my career, I have been taking many of those, leadership style tests, and they always gave me, let's say, two big, predominant styles, which are directive and democratic. Even though it was not easy for me to accept, especially the democratic, because I was like, but I really should be involving much more people on the decision makers. I felt like I have to allow people to have their own voices on the teams that I led, and I was like really democratic because I think that there will be so much more opportunity for people to speak up and to participate, and I don't see myself having such a predominance on democratic, but it is what it is. So when I look at those two, directive and democratic, and it seems that one of the things that most of the teams have recognized me over those years is that I always allow them to have a great autonomy in terms of deciding which is the distance they should be having from me. So I'm not the guy, I'm not the one who will be taking the lead in terms of, okay, so let's talk every 2-3 times a week, or let's talk every day at this hour. But I will allow you to decide when you like to talk to me, and I will allow you to decide which frequency on the intensity of our communications. And it was really funny because the first years of this, when I decided to do this approach, all my feedbacks was I gave people too much autonomy. I was like, how come is that? How come people are complaining that they have a lot of autonomy? That's the first thing I would like to ask. People are actually complaining that I give them autonomy. And it was like, yes, people are complaining because you give them a lot of flexibility. And then I have learned that it's not just about giving them flexibility or autonomy, but also to incorporate accountability on this autonomy. So when you make people accountable for the distance that they like to have from me, or the number of frequencies of meetings, of contacts, of feedbacks they would like to receive, they start feeling a little bit more comfortable with that, because they're no longer floating in the ocean of mesmerizing. So what's happening? What's going on? So I say, well, okay, so you would like to talk to me every week. So let's set up when you like to talk to me. It's okay. It's your call. I won't push you that. I won't ask you for anything. If you do your job, you do it with quality, you deliver everything that we are expecting you to deliver, then it's up to you to decide when you would like me to interfere or like me to help you with something. And that was really a construction over time, because when most of my teammates now, they are much more confident with that. And when they, for example, they switch teams, they say, "Wow, I remember I was so lucky to have you, because you never taught me that you have to talk to me every once in a while." It was like much more when I needed. I knew that I had you. It was funny because lots of people say, "I miss you so much when we were together and we were working, because you always believed in my work. You always allow me to do things that are differently." I say, well, that's why, because that's why I guess where the motivation comes from. And I guess everything that you promote, Heather, regarding loyalty comes from that as well. Comes from the fact that people should be empowered to do things they are able to do. People should be encouraged to rely on its leaders whenever they feel like they need some help or they need some guidance. And we are talking with grown-ups. We're not kids. It's not like I'm talking to my 4-year-old and say, you know what, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing this, or you should be brushing your teeth. So they know what to do. They know the job to be done. So why should I treat them like children? So, and it's funny. And sometimes it's still here that say, no, Gustavo, you give people a lot of autonomy. You say, well, I know that, and I'm doing this on purpose. But sometimes it's hard for people to first adjust themselves to that model, because in many places people are more used to, I don't know, micromanagement, and I make fun of it sometimes, even nano management, so that people are really looking at your agenda and see exactly what you're doing and things like that. And I had one guy that was working for me, and he said, well, I don't know if you realize, but I've been arriving for the last few days a little bit later than usual. I say, yes, I've seen that, but you didn't tell me anything. I say, well, should I told you anything about it? It's your life, my friend. You should do whatever you like to, but as long as you're delivering your results, as long as you are, cooperating with the strategy in the delivering everything that we should be delivering, I'm not here to start looking and tic-tacking how many minutes you have stayed for coffee or how many minutes you have stayed away for lunch. It's a trust-based relationship that we're building here.
And really, who has time for that, right? In the roles that we're in, and we don't have time to be keeping track. And it's interesting. I have the same tendency to give a lot of freedom and to empower. And I think where you go right, where someone could easily go wrong, is to be free. There'd be in an ocean floating around, like you said before, with no guardrails. And so even though they're free and they have flexibility, there's accountability there. So there's a high expectation of results and delivery. And so that's the good counterbalance, because early on in my management career, I think I was just really loose and maybe wasn't as accountable. And so I had to pay the price for that early on, right? And then I realized I needed a counterbalance to some of that in order to make sure that people were staying on track. For those especially who might need more guidance, because some people really just need more guidance. Right?
Yeah, but it's up to them to decide. It's not up to me to decide how much guidance you need. I can tell you, you need this amount of guidance. You look at me and say, you know nothing about what my needs. I say, and it's true. I don't know nothing about the needs everyone needs. What I know is that if you need guidance, let me know, and I can help you with that. If you require 1 hour conversation every day, if you require 2 hours conversation every day, if you require a coach, if you require a mentor, whatever you require, let me know so I can make it happen for you. And please don't forget that I'm here to support you. My only responsibility is to make sure that I'm the one who will be facilitating your work. That's all the that if you can summarize the role of a leader is to make sure that he's able to facilitate his team's work. Anything other than that it has nothing to do with the actual meaning of leadership. Especially in the corporate world. So I tend to like very much, and this is something that I was also learning back in the day when I was in my early years in my career. There was a definition that I liked very much, which was freedom within a framework, which is pretty much what you said, Heather. It's about having people on all guardrails, and exactly. You can walk in here, so it's like I'm doing now with my baby girl. She's 10 months old, so I allow her to go on all around her room. But we have those guards and we have those pillows over here, over there. So see, you can do whatever you like within this square.
Yes. I love that. And, people, I know it always sounds weird or even perennial when we talk about, children and compared to, leadership. And there's so many parallels to it, really. Because we lead inside our home as well as parents. So I think there's just a direct correlation. So I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that those who are listening kind of can take that into to realize that it's okay to lose.
Yes, and just don't forget that we're not talking about children anymore. So when we look at back at the companies, we should treat our colleagues as adults, and that's I guess this is the funny thing about, because we have so many parallels between leadership styles and childrenhood, and when we go back to the office and we still look at those guys and say, those bunch of 4-year-olds or those 5-year-olds. No. They're grown-ups. They know what to do. They're responsible. They are able to think for themselves.
It is funny. There's that, and there's this idea of, this idea of being able to caring for them. This nurturing side of being the manager of people. There that has to exist. People need to know it. Now, obviously, certain people need it less or more than others, right? But I think, again, there's that element of that you would see maybe in the parenting side, that you're right, when it gets down to it, they're adults and they're accountable and they have responsibilities. So it is when you start to look at it, it's a complicated web that we weave here, right? When we're talking about these things, they're all necessary, but it's not always as simple as it sounds.
And for example, there's something that I really like is the David McClelland's theory into those three needs.
Yes.
And it's always funny because we're all talking about the predominant styles and things like that, and people like to say, from the three styles, the one I like more is, I don't know, power, or the one I like more is, to be achievement. But affiliation is always the relegated one. So nobody cares about affiliation, because they seem to say, affiliation is very, is being, very taking care of people, is making people feel, that are being, sheltered and nurtured and things like that. But it's interesting because if you don't connect, and I guess this is why affiliation is so important to me, because if you don't think that you're not able to connect with people and connect to their needs, this trust that is needed is much more difficult to be generated. So how can I start to talk to you? So let's imagine that we're working together, Heather, and I never asked you, how was your day, or how was your weekend? Or I ask this just because I'm trying to be polite and not because I care. I'm not saying that I will be, too much focusing on saying that I also had a barbecue on the weekend, and it's too bad that she didn't invite me, and things like that. No, it's not about it. But it's important to know, did you have a great time with your family? Were you able to have quality time with your loved ones? So did you enjoy yourself? No, I got sick because people so got sick. So perhaps why don't we change a little bit the agenda for this week, or for the agenda for today? So you didn't have proper time to recover yourself, so why don't we take this, which is will require a little bit more effort, so let's push it to another day. So why don't we share this with another colleague, and things like that. So this is part of the agenda of a leader, which is to be able to connect with the situations because for example, if you are a parent and your baby cried all night and you didn't have proper sleep, and then you get back to work, and then, I don't know, at 8:00 things are happening and you have to make a lot of decisions, and you're simply not prepared because you didn't have time to get some rest. And if I'm not aware of that, I will simply ignore it and force you to do something that you are not physically, biologically ready to do, because you're tired, because you haven't had some sleep, because you're nervous, because you're stressed. And then I would like to, I will be pushing you to do things and to promote even more stress than you already have. And how can I then, be consistent and say, you know what, I don't think you're doing a good job, but are you not doing your job because of lack of guidance, because of lack of orientation, or because some external event that has nothing to do with the office happened to you, and I, as a leader, wasn't able to identify that and say, probably this is what is causing this lack of, performance, and this is what is pushing you energy a little down. So let's see what can we do to tackle this, because at this point is where I believe the affiliation is important, because showing that for people that you're not there, you're not spoon feeding them, but you are really creating a sort of connection. You're building that rapport, so they know that other things that happen outside of the work environment also matter to you, because they can affect the quality of the work you're delivering on the next day or the week before.
Yes, that's very true. Okay, so I have a question for you. Do you have in your mind, has there ever been a specific time when you just weren't, let's say, the person you are today, this more emotionally intelligent leader who considers other people's emotions? Can you think of a specific example or story you can share with the listeners about that time when you weren't so great? And what did you do to come out of that to become just the more emotionally intelligent leader you are today?
I guess I had to learn it from the early beginnings, because my first formal leadership role, I was 28. I was a team leader, and all my team were either my age or older. It was a very challenging situation for me, because I didn't have probably the necessary experience that they had. So my team was much more experienced than I was. They tend to know better about the business and tend to know better about how to get things done. And I have to, I could be the one who are the newcomer who are trying to, put myself in a way that I will be interfering with the way people were doing their jobs, and that could not be very well perceived. Or I could be, trying to position myself as a partner and help them understand that I wasn't there to it wasn't just about me, but it was pretty much about them. So how can I could help them to do their jobs better? And in a way, this focus on problem solving helped me a lot, because in the beginning, that initial resistance that they had because I was younger, because I didn't have the necessary experience, started to be neutralized. And people started to look at me and say, you know what, probably you still are not really aware of everything. You probably don't have the same amount of experience that I have, but you are really trying to help me here. So, and I guess that's something that people value a lot. So the fact that you are, making an effort and demonstrating that you're making an effort, that is not about you, but it's about them. This is I guess it was a really turning point for me as well, because I could simply say, you know what, I will impose my style, and if everybody is happy or not, I don't give a damn. It's their problem, and it's not. I'm the boss after all. But I knew that this could be the shortest route to failure. So I needed that. I know that I also didn't have all the time in the world to do that, because we were in the middle of a very important downturn here. So we had to recover our business fast. And this additional challenge was, how can I do that? At the same time, getting the team back together and build this team spirit. So it was really challenging, because it took me a while. But once people started realizing that, and I guess the team was, they gave me this leap of faith and say, you know what, Gustavo, probably I was, prejudging you, and you are really trying to do your best here, and especially because you're not focusing on yourself, you're focusing on the whole team. So to me, it was something that really helped me to, to shape my mindset from that moment on. It wasn't really the easiest choice. It wasn't really the alternative that would be, it was the more risky one, because there was a risk associated to that. But in the end, it was the best one, because everybody won. Something that I also think that is important, that as a leader, you have to think not only about your own wins, but if the team is not winning, you're not winning. So there's no way that this whole situation to go further or to develop if everybody is not benefiting out of it. So it's,
what's interesting about that, which I've really never thought about it quite this way, but when we think about leadership journey, and it's just a consistent process towards continuous improvement, and every day we're just trying to get better, and we're just like, sometimes we're just trying to hang on. We're just trying to survive in some days, right? Depending on what's happening to us and around us. But the one thing that we really have to think closely about, not to be overwhelmed by it, to be very aware and cognizant, is that as we are growing as leaders, our team is coming along with us. And so they have to come through and with us through all the pain and the peaks and the valleys. If they're with us, they're with us in and out of that. And so they're seeing it, they're feeling it, whether we think we're including them or not, they're there. Because people are always watching, and our people are always watching, and we have the opportunity to say, okay, tell them, okay, I know this has been a tough time, and I have not been my best, and I kind of need you to sniff test, or to kind of be a check and balance for me, and how I'm trying to go through a change. I'm trying to be better, but you don't really realize that when we're going through this journey, that they're right there alongside of us, hoping for a better leader, clapping and for a better leader. And when they see those signs of brilliance, those glimpses of light. They're like, yes. And sometimes we fall back and they're with us on that journey when we fall backward. And we have to give them that, kind of give them the benefit of saying, thank you for being with me on my journey as I am with you.
Yes. And everybody recognizes that. Everybody realizes that. It's not only about your team, but it's about all other teams. So you are under surveillance all the time. So your team is evaluating you all the time. Your team will be looking at you, and it will be measuring you by the actions that you do as a leader. But if you have multiple teams like I had, it was really interesting because we were 3 teams working together. And I saw that the other teams members were always evaluating me and comparing me to their own leaders and say, he's doing this, my leader is doing that. So this consistency is also necessary to be very full. And that's why I guess it's not only about your own teams, but also regarding the leadership team. So we at that moment, specifically when we had those 3 teams working together, it was really important for me that the other team leaders were aligned with me, so we were consistent, because I didn't want to be caught saying one thing to my team and then somebody from the other team overheard it and say, you know what, you're saying something here, but I have received other message from my team leaders. So it was really important for me that we have this consistency when we had this alignment, so the message was fluid to everybody. So everybody say, you know what, there are different leadership styles because people are different, because Gustavo has its own, Heather has its own, everybody's different, but the consistency of the message is the same. Perhaps the intensity of the message may change. Perhaps some on the elements, or say, well, I like to talk it one-on-one. The other guy likes to talk it as a circle, everybody talking together. But the precision and consistency of the message has to be the same. And this is also something that is really important. It's not just about me saying something and the other guy, saying something totally different, because this will put us in a very bad situation.
Yes. It's interesting that you say that. I was just on a coaching call earlier with an executive, and we had that conversation about, joining with the people at your same level so that you can make sure that messaging is consistent. We don't realize how much confusion comes about when we don't do that. So, kudos to you for making sure that you got that alignment in the messaging.
No,
we don't
yes,
do that enough.
Everything that you say it will not be interpreted the way that you say by the other people, because people listen to what you say and it has its own interpretation. So that's why I guess this consistency is important, because if I say something and my peers say the same thing, even in different ways, they have to say the same thing. Because when the people hear from the 3 different people say, they are saying exactly the same thing, even though they have different styles of saying it. So I can be a little bit more assertive. The other guy be a little bit more, start, beating around the bush, but the message is there. But at the end of the day, bottom line is that the people have to receive the same information in a level that they say, you know what, they are all saying the same thing, even though they're saying this in different ways. So this consistency at the end of the day is the focus on the success of any communication effort that you should be doing. How can we make sure that people are understanding what you're saying? And how can we make sure that even though you're being very clear about the message, if this same level of clarity has been perceived by your listeners? Because sometimes I may think that I'm the clearest speaker in the world, but if people don't understand me, what is it worth for? So it's not, you haven't reached your goal. So it's really cool.
Yes, that's so true. So for the leaders that are listening, that could be, let's say there's someone that's struggling in their leadership, or they just are at a crossroads with things, or, what would be maybe one pearl of wisdom you would leave them with today, to those that are on the call listening?
I guess the first thing that I would recommend everybody is to be true to yourself. And I also always kind of invite people to think about, how would you like to be treated? How would you like to be, managed? How would you like to be, exposed to situations? Because this will give you a very good hint in terms of how people in your team would like to be treated as well. So what is good for you and the way you like to be treated is pretty much the same way people on your team would like to be treated. So first think of trying to test your own hypothesis. I normally say that it's important that we trust our instincts, but at the same time make sure that we are able to feel the water and see if the way that we're doing is adequate or not, if it's too harsh or not, if it's the way you would like to receive this. So this sort of empathy is necessary, and as much as we are able to do that, the possibility of becoming more successful increases a lot, because it's something that is genuine. It's something that you're doing based on your own set of beliefs, on your own, way of thinking. And this authenticity, I guess it's important to allow people to see that you're doing this for yourself and you're not playing a role or a part when you're doing that. So I guess this is something that is interesting that I normally say to people who are in a situation like this. So never ignore your instincts, but also try to rely as much as possible and try to test these approaches with people you really trust and people who have been there for you for a long time. So it doesn't matter if those people knows about the business or know about the teams, but they will be able to. They pretty much know about you. So you see, no, you know what, Gustavo? It sounds like a little too fake. Gustavo, you know what? You're being too nice. Gustavo, you're beating around the bush too much. So why don't you go straight to the point and tell exactly the things the way they are? So I guess this brings legitimacy to everything that you say. This brings people closer to you, and having people close to you is probably the biggest asset you can have as a leader.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. That's just a great way to end this. For those who are listening, who received some really good nuggets and value from listening to Gustavo and our conversation, don't forget to like it and to rate it and review it on iTunes, or actually Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen, Spotify, because that's how other people can find the podcast. But also take notes of this and share it with those around you. Don't make this learning just be limited to you. There's obviously time put into this on your side and ours, and we want to just make sure you get the most out of it. But Gustavo, thank you so much for joining. This has been really amazing.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And if anybody would like to contact me, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Gustavo Tavares, Top Employers. I'm really happy to interact with as much people as I want to. So please feel free to write me, send me a message, and I'll be really happy to get in contact with you all.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.